Television series can be good or bad, great or terrible, but one thing is for certain, they hardly ever have a perfect ending. I've seen hundreds of television shows and only a handful of them felt as if they ended on a proper note. And interestingly enough, each of those shows seem to have one thing in common. They all ended their show when they wanted to, not because they were canceled. 9 times out of 10, however, most shows try to milk as much as they can out of producers and audiences around the world until they run into that inescapable eventuality: cancellation. Dexter was a show that I personally loved. Out of the hundreds of different shows that I had watched throughout my life, it was one of the shows that, while watching, made me question if it was actually my favorite show of all time. It was that good. Especially the 4th season. The way that it started was slow, but I got to love this character, the ambiance, and the rising tension throughout the series. I even enjoyed the series finale, which everybody and their mom seemed to call one of the worst series finales ever seen in the history of TV. I didn't really understand that to that degree. Needless to say, I was very excited to hear about Dexter: New Blood, a continuation of the story that had enraptured the attention of so many people. And everybody seemed to want to know one thing: will this series redeem Dexter? Or does it suffer the same fate as that infamous series finale that aired 9 years ago? The world at large believes Dexter Morgan died in a tragic boating accident, and in a way, the world at large wasn't wrong. Far from the life that he knew, living under a false name in the small town of Iron Lake, New York, he successfully tamped down his dark passenger for nearly 10 years. With a normal job and a chief of police girlfriend, he seems that he's got life under control, until his son shows up and turns his world upside down. Rattled, Dexter yields to his homicidal urges and soon finds himself on a collision course with a very dangerous local. Starting off this brand new limited series, I was unsure if I'd like it or not, especially with the majority of the first episode, which showed a very different version of Dexter. What are some differences between this show and the original? Well, first of all, Dexter hadn't killed anybody in 10 years. It kind of seems unlikely based off of how his dark passenger had worked in the previous show up until this point. It could basically be compared to cocaine addiction, yet here he is living out his new life as Jim Lindsay, not killing anybody in a decade. There's no theme song that I grew to love. There's no inner dialogue narrating the episode. Nothing. Heck, there's not even a ghost of Harry. The only thing that there was in that first episode was Michael C. Hall back in the role. And honestly, that might have been enough. By the end of the pilot, Dexter was back. Harrison was back in town. There may not be a Coda Harry anymore, but there's kind of a sort of Deb now. And when Dexter begins to get the idea that Harrison might have a little dark passenger of his own, well, that's when things get a little bit tricky. Trickier still when we learn about the serial killer of this season, who is absolutely chilling, by the way. And it wouldn't be Dexter without an element of cat and mouse with the police hot on his trail. The best way that I can explain this season is to basically call it a slow burner. It starts off pretty slow, but that last episode is one of the most tense I think I've ever felt while watching Dexter, bar none. I was confident that this series finale redeemed the show for a lot of people that hated the last one. But as I've soon come to learn, a lot of people actually hate this one and call it even worse than Season 8. So before I get into this finale, be warned, we're going to be getting into spoiler territory here. People hated that last season of Dexter because, poetically, it should have probably ended with Dexter dying, ending his 8-year character arc. But Showtime decided to keep their cards on the table and fake his death. I didn't think that it was as bad as people put it out to be, but, I could sort of see their complaints. In Dexter: New Blood, they did it. They killed him. They did what fans wanted them to do in the first place, and this had fans once again enraged. But why? Honestly, I'm kind of flabbergasted, but let's take a look at some of the complaints that I've seen and read. The police chief in this small town put together what Miami-Dade never could do in 8 years, in just a few episodes. Yes and no. This is not a reboot, though. Nobody's starting from scratch. This police chief simply researched all the evidence that was already readily available, continuing the search for the Bay Harbor Butcher as if this was Season 9, which it basically is. With a few hints from a true crime podcast, she was finally able to solve the case. Dexter killing Coach was so out of character and unnecessary. Well, you would be right if that's what he did. But he did not kill Coach. Coach pulled his gun and he fired into the cell, ricocheting the bullet, which bounced back and killed him. A little Looney Tunes, of course, but that wasn't Dexter killing anybody. I think it was still in the lines of things that Dexter would do. What wasn't in the line of what he would do is basically admitting to killing Coach, saying that he left him no choice. Not exactly what happened. What about this one? Harrison does a complete 180. You're kind of right about this one. His arc throughout the season is wanting to know his father a little bit more and to unleash his own dark passenger, both of which he does do, but as soon as he learns Dexter killed Coach, he's like, well, you deserve to die. In a way, I do understand his reasoning and arguments for this, but I don't think it's a full 180. I think he'll always have a dark passenger and essentially become the next Dexter, but he killed his father because even though Dexter was saving other people's lives, that was never really his intention. That was ultimately just an ends justifying the means situation, which means that Dexter's still a villain, still a bad guy, and Harrison's right. So when he killed Dexter, a part of it did make a lot of poetic sense and a much deeper level than you probably realize. Ultimately, I really did enjoy this season. It felt like an earlier season of Dexter, sprinkled in with bits and pieces of later seasons, especially with the 2 cameos from Batista, and I thought that the end was actually fantastic, the more that I think about it. I am sad to see it end this way, but honestly, that's exactly where it was heading the whole time. If I had to rate this season, I would rate it 4.5 out of 5 stars. If you're a fan of the original series, I think you'll enjoy 90% of the show. And once you get to the end, I need you to keep your mind open. Let it sit for a while. Think about what actually happened. You might be surprised. But if you're new to the series, this is not a good starting off point. Not at all. Go back to the start and make your way to this season. But what about you guys? Have you seen Dexter, New Blood? And if so, I want to hear your thoughts about it in the comment section down below. Did it redeem Dexter if you hated Season 8? Was Season 8 better? I want to hear it all. As for YouTube, you guys know what to do. Hit that like, subscribe button, and bell to be notified when I come up with my next review. And until then, peace out.